Oh, we got the hot tub working. Oh, baby. I want to talk this morning about memes. I didn't even know what a meme was until maybe about 8 months ago I looked it up. But I think even before that, I had become curious about something, and that was what are those images that very quickly communicate a complex idea? So, for example, if I'm going to say 200 years ago, I had asked a moderately educated person in the United States to give me a imagery, an illustration of dithering indecision. Dithering indecision. They would have said Hamlet. You ask somebody today, I don't think, either you'd get 10 different answers, none of which would be Hamlet, or they wouldn't have one. Or if I had asked, give me an example of homicidal jealousy, they would say Othello. Today, I don't know what they would say. All right, so that's what a meme is some imagery or group of words that communicates an idea quickly. All right, so there's a poem by a Sufi master, and I'm intrigued by the Sufis. I think probably all religions have folks who use their religion like magic to make the gods happy and so that they can prosper and their children live to an old age, blah, blah, blah. But all religions a lot of times will have a mystical branch. So in Christianity, it's Thomas Merton, let's see, what's called the Seven Mountains, something like that. And in Judaism, it's, God damn it, what's that called? Abracadabra, I think, comes from the Kabbalah. There we go. And in Islam, it is Sufism. So the mystical branch of a religion seeks for the actual experience of God. Not so much interested in trying to win God's favor by appropriate behavior, but to actually experience God. And so the Sufis, I call it dancing. They don't, they don't dance, but they chant. If you've ever heard of whirling dervishes, look them up on Google. It's very interesting. These tall men in these long woolen dresses, and so as they whirl, these dresses go out to a diameter of 5-6 feet. It's pretty impressive. Okay, so a guy named Feld, F-E-I-L-D, went looking for a Sufi master, and one that he interviewed took him up to the top of a hill where he had a little hut that he had created himself a little meditational chapel dedicated to the Virgin Mary, this Islamic mystic. And what he was looking at in his meditations was that the notion of God's spirit forming life without, insemination by a human male. And I don't know whether they mean by the Immaculate Conception or whether they meant Jesus, virgin birth, but that notion to him symbolized the individual's experience of repenting and then having God born within human flesh. And so every human being seeking to have God born in human flesh is the virgin birth is representative of that, and that's what his little chapel was about. Okay, so I guess for him, he had this one-man meme. Now, there's a Sufi poet way back, 1400s in Turkey, and his name was Rumi. And believe it or not, Rumi, this 14th century Turkish Islamic mystic poet, is the most popular poet in America. I guess even more so than Robert Frost, if you can believe it. So here's one of his poems. One night a man was crying, Allah, Allah. His lips grew sweet with the praising, until a cynic said, so, I have heard you calling out, but have you ever gotten any response? The man had no answer to that. He quit praying and fell into a confused sleep. He dreamed. He saw Khidr, Khidr. Now, there's a meme in Islamic culture, or, some places anyway, maybe not all Muslims. Khidr is not one of the 7 major prophets, but he is like a teacher to the prophets. And because he was in a barren field, and somehow as a result of his praying and his worthiness, the field grew up into this verdant greenness. So just like St. Patrick's color is green, Khidr's color is green. So in Islamic culture, a man dressed all in green is the meme Khidr, teacher to the prophets. So Khidr says, Khidr, the guide of souls in a thick green foliage, why did you stop praising? Because I've never heard anything back. Khidr says, this longing you express is the return message. The grief you cry out from draws you toward union. Your pure sadness that wants help is the secret cup. Listen to the moan of a dog for its master. That whining is the connection. There are loved dogs no one knows the names of. Give your life to be one of them. So, love dogs is a meme that, to those who are familiar with Rumi, communicates that longing that a person has to know that God is there, but the longing to know it, according to Khidr and Rumi, that longing is the evidence that he's there. So the love dogs is a meme for that rather sophisticated spiritual concept. All right. Now, another meme is Hamlet's soliloquy, to be or not to be, whether 'tis nobler in the mind, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so he's contemplating suicide. Now, today's meme for that is Thelma and Louise. They have completely exhausted the possibilities of living in a male-dominated world, and so they drive their car off a cliff. You ain't seen that movie? You better see that movie. At any rate, so there's an example of a suicide meme that probably a whole lot of people are familiar with, where they may not be at all familiar with that's what Hamlet's soliloquy is all about. Incidentally, Lincoln was quite familiar with some of those works of Shakespeare, and he was not a big fan of that soliloquy, but there's another soliloquy in Hamlet that he was a fan of. I would suggest that a depressive such as Abraham Lincoln probably did not enjoy meditating on a soliloquy about suicide. Now, there's something in that soliloquy about suicide that I'm going to say is a meme about living with oppression and living with that life sucks. And it then pops up in the Declaration of Independence. So let's take a look at the speech. Hamlet is contemplating suicide, but he's contemplating, what happens after life? What dreams may come. It may be worse over there than it is over here. So he says, for who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the insults from proud people, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes. When he himself might his quietus make, in other words, he could make himself quiet with a bare bodkin, a knife. You could end all that crap with a knife. Who would fardels bear? I don't know what fardels are, but maybe it's like that guy in the airplane wouldn't quit farting. To grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others we know not of. Thus conscience does make cowards of us all. Okay, now, you can bet your life that Thomas Jefferson was quite familiar with the soliloquy of Hamlet. And so, a long ways down in the Declaration of Independence, he says, accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. So if you've learned to live with evil, people are willing to live with it rather than throw it off to try something else. And it's the evidence is rife that the colonists tried to play both sides of the fence. Anytime the Brits would come forward and offer amnesty and a reward if people would swear allegiance to the king, they'd go do it. At Valley Forge, Washington picked Valley Forge because the surrounding countryside should be enough to feed his troops, except the damn farmers sold all their produce to the Brits, who could pay gold. Washington could only pay with this worthless paper crap. What do they call them? Continentals? At any rate, so yeah, people are willing to put up with evils they've learned to suffer rather than throw them off and live with something else. So here's my real question for today. Does a culture gain something by having memes that a whole lot of people can use so that, let's say, you want to communicate to your kid something about suicide and the concerns about what the hell's waiting for you on the other side. So if you're literate, you know that it's Hamlet's soliloquy. If you've been watching movies, maybe it's Thelma and Louise. But so does a culture is a culture enriched by having memes that are shared by a whole lot of people? So the opposite side of that question is, I would observe that our culture today does not have very many memes that we can share. So now, to kind of, what the hell, that's enough for today. You get the idea. Thank you very much for listening, and I'd sure like to know if you are listening.